A little bit after 1 o'clock, I think we're going ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for everybody that's here in attendance and those viewing online. We're live streaming this and recording it in case you can't view it online live for later viewing, so we'd greatly appreciate your participation and being able to do that. Oh, can't hear? Oh, let me scoot this forward a little bit. How's that? Is that a little bit better? Okay, great. Thank you for alerting me to that. It's very important. All right, my name is John Cross, and I'm a consultant with Slavin Management Consultants, an executive search firm that is assisting the Doña Ana County Board of County Commissioners with the selection of their next county manager. This is community meeting number 2 that we're facilitating and introducing this portion of the county and others that it might be interested to the 4 finalists here that are completing that last phase really of the interview and selection process here. My role is to facilitate this meeting today, so we have scheduled about 2 hours, but the first hour and a half will be formal questions and answers. I'm going to be starting off the meeting here today with a couple of questions that we've selected that have come in online through the portal that was set up by the county, in which, by the way, we had over 95 questions that came in through the online portal, so we're really appreciative of the engagement by the community at large. It's very, very important to the Commission as they consider all of the input as they make this important decision on their next county manager here. Now, before I start with my questions, I'm going to have each candidate introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll go into the questions. After I'm completed with my questions, if there are any members of the audience that would like to ask questions, we have a microphone here right in front of me, and we'd just ask you to come forward and ask your question right at that location. And to the extent that it's applicable, if it's a broad enough question, we will have all candidates respond to that question. You can certainly ask a question of their background to the specific candidate, and that candidate will be asked to respond accordingly. But in any event, before us here at the Anthony Fire Station is a microphone for your use, which, by the way, I wanted to thank the chief for opening up this facility, this brand new fire station facility. On behalf of the Commission, we're very, very grateful for making this accommodation for us. It's really a wonderful facility and providing a much-needed service here to this part of the county for sure. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here and ask the first question. And we're going to go in alphabetical order by their last name first, and then I'll reverse that for the second question, and then I'll kind of mix it up so that the person answering last doesn't have an unfair advantage to hear the other answers first and be able to formulate what they might think is the best answer here as part of the panel. But for the first one, we'll start alphabetically here, and the first question is, again, these are coming in from the online portal, so again, thank you for submitting those. So the first question is, broadly speaking, what is the county's role in the community, and what is the county manager's role in the county? And we'll start on my right here with Scott Andrews. Scott, if you could take the first question.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all for being here today, and thank you for this opportunity. The county role in the community is simply to provide essential services and to try to reach all of our 225,000 residents throughout this vast 4,000 square mile area. A little harder to do when you have an area this large. So making sure you don't have your haves and have-nots, making sure you have a blueprint to reach everyone where they are, following through in your strategic plan, reevaluating every 5 years. Sorry, there's a lot of echo there. Get that far away? There we go. And making sure you have the resources planned for the long term, looking at things in 20-year windows, but also reevaluating the budget every 6 months to 1 year to do so. That's the role of the county. The county manager, you have a team of 800-900 staff, depending on the season, to get the work of those 225,000 constituents addressed. A little harder to do, so everything is a balancing act. Your strategic plan is your playbook. Your priorities are deemed by the council. That's what we are to prioritize. Implementing the Commission's goals and utilizing the resources, taxpayer money, and the staff to the best of our abilities. So working with the already heavy workload, And then adding in all the priorities of the community, that is a delicate balancing act. It takes a lot of prioritization. County manager has to have head constantly at the high level, but also not be so lost that you don't see how all the communities are impacted. Whereas at the border, perhaps in Las Cruces, you're looking to bring in big businesses, but you want to make sure in the smaller communities you're not losing that look, feel, and authenticity of the community. And it's a delicate balancing act. Having served in 5 previous communities and city management and 4 others, I bring a lot of experience to the table, and I look forward to doing it here as well.
Barbara, before you continue, I failed to make an announcement too that there's Spanish translation interpretation services available at this meeting as well that the county has provided. So I wanted to make sure that was aware. We were aware of that. Barbara, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. So the role of the county and the community is to really understand the needs of the community and then provide those services. And they are essential services to the community when we think about public safety and economic development and health and quality of life and all the utilities that are provided by the county to the community. The county manager needs to understand the direction of the governing board, the elected officials, and be able to implement their vision. In doing that, that person needs to understand all the resources available, the partnerships needed in order to carry out the mission, and to keep people focused on the desired outcome that everyone is working towards. The county manager's role is also to periodically communicate with respect to the strategic plan and other long-range plans, as well as to just be accessible, responsible, and transparent in all communications with the community at any time. So the county manager plays an important role in being the face of county government and also the ear of county government as well, so that we can more effectively match the needs of the community with the services being provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Stephen?
From my perspective, the role of the county is obviously to provide kind of those historical services that many of us identify with the county. Public safety being probably the most high profile and expected service, but also to, as mentioned, provide some of those other essential services that have become county services over the years since our county was formed. That include now infrastructure services, things like our roads, now utilities, being able to make sure that our citizens, especially those who are in our colonias, get the necessary infrastructure to have good, high-quality places to live. And then the role of the county manager is to take those needs, communicate them up to the Board of County Commissioners, help in identifying pathways to meet the needs, and then also take the visions and asks of the county commission back down to staff and figure out ways to implement those. And in many cases, serve as kind of a team lead to bring together the appropriate partners to resolve some of the challenging issues throughout our county, which the county itself may not always be best positioned to address, but there are key constituents that we can collaborate with in many cases, bring to the table, including community leadership, our municipalities, school leaders, to address many of the issues. And the county manager plays a very key role in being that conduit of information back and forth and representing the county out to the external entities and kind of making sure people know who they can contact, that the county is open for both asks and recommendations for solutions, and really, again, working in a collaborative way to address the challenges that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Mark?
Basically, I believe that the county's role is to provide efficient, effective services to the residents, and as many of those services as they can provide. I think it's the role of the county manager to implement and enforce the policies established by the county commission. I think it's also the county manager's role to understand the county, understand the different communities, be able to convey that information to the commission for their policy consideration. I think it's also the role of the county manager to have an open door policy, to listen to residents, to be able to be accessible to employees should they have any concerns. I think it's also the role of the county manager to make sure that you have as many partnerships as possible with the county. Collaborations are very successful for counties and for municipalities and also other entities. So I think the county manager also needs to be a unifying force with elected officials. But again, the county commission is the governing body, and I think it's my role, the manager's role, to work with that commission, make sure that they understand all of the information that goes into making a policy decision, as well as any ramifications or drawbacks from implementing that policy.
Thank you, Mark. One of the things I had failed to do at the introduction was actually ask the candidates to introduce themselves. So not to stunt our momentum too much before we get to question number 2, I'm going to ask each of the candidates very briefly, just do a quick introduction of themselves. So Scott, let's start with you. We'll kind of move down the row this way.
Sure, I'll be brief. Scott Andrews. I'm currently the Assistant City Manager in Bakersfield, California. I have 21 years of local government experience. I'm born and raised in the Tampa area, where I started my local government career, then went to the Atlanta area for the next 11 years, and California the last few years, and hoping to come here and be the latest resident in New Mexico shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Bencomo, and I am currently the Chief Administrative Officer at the City of Las Cruces. I've been in local government for 14 years. I'm very happy to serve the community. And prior to that, I have experience in healthcare and also in technology. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to hopefully continue the service to the community. Certainly, this is my county. I love it, and I'm looking forward to helping in whatever way I can. Thank you.
I'm Stephen Lopez, and I, for the last 2.5 months, have been your interim county manager. Before that, I was with the Office of Emergency Management for a little over 3 years as the emergency manager, and prior to that, 33 years in law enforcement with New Mexico State University, the last 8 as the chief of police. I am a 2-time graduate of New Mexico State University with degrees in criminal justice and in psychology, and did obtain a master's from the University of Washington in strategic planning for critical infrastructures. I am interested in continuing to be in this position in order to bring some stability and some positive direction to both our team of county employees who I have found really do want to serve and make the communities better, as well as to support our county commissioners. Thank you.
My name is Mark Tyner. I have 25 years experience in local government. 23 of the 25 have been in county government. I have a wife and 2 children. I enjoy being a manager. One of my main goals is to ensure that the community is in a better position when I leave than when I've got there. My true goal is to help the county commission be more effective. I've always enjoyed that work. I've always been open and honest, listening to anyone that has any problems. And if there's a way we can help, I've always ended up trying to do that and do that the most effective way that I could. Again, collaboration with other entities is very important, and I've been able to do that successfully over the years. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity. I think this is a community and a county that has vast resources, and I think your potential is unlimited. It's very exciting. I think the people, you can tell there is an excitement or an optimism when you go out in the community. I think that's very refreshing. And I think you have a lot to look forward to and a lot to be thankful for here in this county. And I also would like to thank thank the county commission and the fire department for these facilities. These are very nice, and your equipment as well, so everything looks really good, and the community is really good. It's clean, environment is fantastic. You just have a lot to be proud of in this community.
All right, thank you everybody for those introductions. Okay, let's proceed with question number 2. I'm going to have Mark start us off here with his answer. Question number 2 is, what unique skills do you bring to this opportunity that you believe the positions you believe are you're best fit for this position? Excuse me. So let me repeat that. What unique skills do you bring to this opportunity that you believe positions you to be the best for this position? So Mark?
I enjoy working in communities and local government. That's something that if you select that as a career, as a lot of you know, that's something you do out of a desire to assist people. You're not going to get rich in local government, but you do get the satisfaction of helping people and making a real impact on their daily lives. I have always had an open door policy, again, for staff and residents alike. I also like assisting the county commission and making them as effective as they can be and assisting in any way possible. So that's what I believe. I've always worked like that. It's always been successful for me in these past 25 years. So I've always enjoyed that. I like working with elected officials. I enjoy that. I know they are accountable. I want to always make the governing body proud of what I do, of how I conduct myself, my professionalism. I also want to project that onto the employees, that they understand and they see how I act in times of crisis. So that's my take on that, and I appreciate local government has a lot of responsibility, and they get blamed for a lot of things, even when it's not their responsibility or they have anything to do with it. But we understand that, we explain that, we try to get that message out to the public, to the residents. If it's not something that we can help with, it's something that we try to put them in touch with someone else that possibly can help.
So from my side, the skills that I bring to this position really do start with the 36 years spent in public service already. I have developed a lot of skills during that time, including the ability to listen, the ability to take criticism, and anybody who steps into a county manager role not expecting criticism will be quickly disappointed. And to understand that often that criticism is because of either frustration or because people have a need that is not being met by the governmental entity. And that is then an opportunity for us to find a way to serve the needs of whether that's an internal customer or an external customer, and not take it personally. Even if it sounds like it might be a personal attack, that's usually not the intent. I also bring a skill set of having worked with a large number of the entities that the county manager does have to interact with, 2.5 months of actually sitting in the position, and then a skill set related to that strategic planning for critical infrastructures, which is going to become an ever-increasing need within our county to ensure that our residents have access to clean water, to wastewater, to good roads, to broadband, and any other services that the county can improve, including electrical. Thank you.
Thank you. So my background is actually in finance and analysis, but I've been able to apply that to a lot of different work experience in both the private sector and the public sector. But I will say, and I have said, that the job title that's meant the most to me has been public servant. I have enjoyed my time in the public sector, understanding how important the services are in the daily lives of the people in our community, and the need for us as local government to provide those services in the best way possible. One of the things that's near and dear for me is to help focus on continuous process improvement, just always looking at what we're doing and how we can do it better, because there's always room for improvement. There's new technology that can be implemented. There are new ideas that come in as new people come into the organization. Always being open to that is very important. Am I too close to that? Okay. I think that the skills that I bring are primarily around being able to listen, to learn, and to lead, and that has helped me to be successful in 3 different industries, and then to apply what I've learned as I've gone along to different positions. And I think that in closing, I'll just say that my guiding values are integrity, professionalism, and service. It really guides everything I do, both with the teams that I work with internally, with the community that I engage with, and with the goals that we hope to achieve and work together to have the best outcome for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of my tangible skills and background, I have a long background in economic development, parks and recreation, quality of life initiatives, and community engagement. That's what allowed me to proceed on to different management roles in the last few years. But that's just on paper. What I think sets me apart is how much I care. I think that I'm a high school coach. I'm a little Ted Lasso sometimes, and I just really enjoy growing a team, being a part of the team, getting to know the people involved, and that extends out to the community. The hardest part in the role is seeing the overarching goals and where you want the community to be in 20 years, but then not missing the steps in between, not missing the community character. Just driving here, the 30, 40-minute drive from where we started, you see the changes in the community. You see the food deserts. You see the places that they just want the basics, while other places, obviously, we're trying to attract big business. It's a delicate balancing act. I've helped implement 4 strategic plans in the past. One of the most exciting things you get to do as a true local government nerd. So I look forward to the opportunity here as well.
All right, thank you. This is the time where we'd like to open up the meeting to any questions that might come from the community. Yes, Mr. Chairman?
The candidates, when you're not speaking, please keep your mics muted. Keep your mics muted. We're getting some feedback.
All right, let me just do a sound check. Can you all hear me okay? All right, fantastic. Thank you for that. All right, as I was saying, this is the portion of the meeting where we'd like to open it up if there are any questions from anybody in the audience here in person. We, at our previous meeting, did field some questions that came in online as well. And we have Anita coming forward.
Good afternoon. So this was a question from the last session we didn't get to. There is some discussion about the county using reserves for some community investments. And the submitter would like to know, what are 3 items you would recommend we use the reserves for, and why?
All right, thank you for that question. Let's start with Barbara on that one to start us off. Barbara?
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion everywhere, I think, in using reserves for community investments as local governments look for options for resources to meet the growing needs of the community. I think that one of the opportunities we have right now with the recent adoption of the strategic plan is to look at those initiatives and understand how we can fund some of the things that have already been identified as priorities by the Commission for the community. I think that we have heard at recent public meetings about the needs, for example, of the colonias and the infrastructure there. That is certainly another area to look at capital. When you need to use reserves, that is a non-recurring revenue source. So you typically want to use those for things like capital or for one-time expenditures, whether it's acquisition of critical equipment, whether it's fire engines or other apparatus, or large equipment for public works, for example, or investments in roads and that sort of thing. So if that was the funding source we were looking at for reserves, and those are the types of expenditures that I would be looking for. Infrastructure, equipment, maybe pilot programs where they're not ongoing programmatic expenditures. And I think that the county has done a great job identifying some of the priorities needed in the strategic plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Stephen, let's go to you next with that question.
Doña Ana County is in a very fortunate position that we do have some healthy reserves, so much so that we have been criticized by the state government because they want to see us using reserves instead of just asking for the state support. So it's absolutely appropriate that we do look intentionally at how we can invest those reserves to make a difference. One of the areas we need to look at using those reserves, Barbara kind of touched on it, is equipment replacement. We have equipment right now that is being budgeted out of the annual budget that might be able to be shifted, those one-time expenditures, to reserves and therefore free up those recurring funds. Another area that we need to look at is our infrastructure. Barbara kind of touched on that, especially infrastructure that is related to our other goals. Infrastructure that may be holding back economic development opportunities. Infrastructure extensions that are keeping residents from being able to connect to water or wastewater. Roads that right now are either high dust generators or roads that are not adequately serving the residents in our area. And then the third area that we need to take a very serious look at is deferred maintenance of Doña Ana County facilities and or expansion of Doña Ana County facilities. We have a number of facilities that are at or rapidly approaching 20 plus years of life and have not had adequate investments into them, including the County Government Center. We have a number of our facilities that need a very thorough review for accessibility. And that's not just at the ADA level, but that's really to make sure that we are able to meet the needs of all of our constituents. But many of our facilities were put in with a little bit of money that came down from an ICIP request, that's an infrastructure and capital improvement program or projects request to the state. And we put in things like modular buildings with steep ramps. We have restrooms that aren't adequate for meeting the needs of people. And so really looking at our facilities, and as we do that look, it may also mean that we need to evaluate whether we need to continue services in a facility where 20 years ago when that facility was put in, there was a very different environment there. And if we might not have an opportunity to better meet the needs of the community with a good strategic investment of some of those reserves and allow the shuttering of some facilities that really are at a fairly high cost to us to continue to operate. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Mark, let's go to you next.
I think when you begin to expend reserves, you need to be very careful. You need to know how much you can afford to extend out of that fund because, again, it is not revenue that you will easily replace. The things that I think of when it comes to expending reserves are facilities or capital improvements, possibly transportation and law enforcement and public service. Depending on what the needs of the community are, I think that would drive the three categories that you want to expend those funds on. So I think you need to have a true assessment of what the needs are. Are those immediate needs? Are those emergency needs? And again, what are those three top categories? Are they public service? Are they facility driven? Are they capital improvements? Another category that you might look at spending reserves is economic development because you can experience a return on those investments. But I think you need to have a true assessment of what the most vital and essential needs are for the community before you select those three.
Thank you, Mark. Scott?
We're going to share a mic. A lot of the fantastic answers have already been used here. I think confidently I can say any of my fantastic peers here would implement the same way. Our strategic plan is our roadmap moving forward. So working backwards from there, that highlights economic development and community health and wellness overall as the priorities. At that point, as was said earlier by one of my peers, looking at that comprehensively on how that matches up within the regions. Stretching your dollar. When I looked into this opportunity and did my due diligence, talking to some of the leaders at the state level, that is in fact, we have reserves. That's a luxury. I can tell you in the current community that passed a 1% sales tax, if it hadn't passed, we might have been leaning on the state for guidance. So when I looked into a new opportunity here, they said just that there are reserves in place. I would put the onus back on the state. Here's our priorities. Here's what we're looking at. Help us leverage these dollars. We only have so much and so many priorities to address. So I would then stretch those dollars as much as we can. Can we partner with the city? Can we partner with the state? Again, the playbook is in place. We just want to make sure we follow our priorities.
All right, thank you, Scott. Hello? Okay, good. Thank you very much. I want to ask members of the community to see if there's a question that has come to mind. Yes, ma'am, come right up to the podium here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chief Vanessa Ordonez, and one of the questions I do have for the panel is, what is your vision as it relates to public safety collaboration to deter crime? Specifically, we have small municipalities who have limited resources. That is my question. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Stephen, let's start with you with that question, and then Mark, you'll be up next.
I think it's important to realize criminals do not know nor respect jurisdictional boundaries. They will take advantage of the citizens of our county regardless of whether they are in a municipality or in a rural area, and therefore cooperation with our law enforcement agencies is absolutely crucial. Now, a lot of that happens at the agency level, but that does not mean that the county government as a whole doesn't have some good opportunities to support that. And that can come from some of the strategic investments that have already been discussed outside of this search with the Board of County Commissioners. Things like developing a regional real-time crime center where information can be gathered through a collection of variety of sources and shared with all of the affected jurisdictions, to where the City of Anthony doesn't have to have resources committed there, but the Sheriff's Department's crime analysts that are working in the Regional Real-Time Crime Center can be monitoring, for example, traffic cameras that are in the area. And when they know that there is somebody moving towards the City of Anthony, they can actually track and alert the Anthony Police Department staff that somebody is coming their direction. That same regional approach on analyzing general crime trends can be useful. And the ability to stand up multi-agency task forces to address the criminals who commit the largest percentage of crimes. Go after those high-frequency offenders in order to really make a big impact. And then there's also something that I'm going to give 100% credit to our Sheriff Kim Stewart, that is taking equipment that is still got good serviceable use and sharing it back down to our municipal partners. When the Sheriff's Department gets new equipment, replaces with something that either new direction, new equipment, but what's going out still has useful life, being able to share that down with the smaller agencies makes a lot of sense. And it is still the same taxpayers that have already funded that initially. Being able to continue to get useful life out of it makes a lot of sense. And so certainly the county can support those partnership opportunities as they arise. Thank you.
Chief, if I could ask you to repeat that question. We had some sound interference before I turn it over to Mark for the answer.
Yes, I believe the question is, what is your vision with collaboration, specifically for deterring crime in our community? Because we do have limited resources amongst the several smaller municipalities throughout the county. So what is the vision for the collaboration with the smaller municipalities in regard to deterring crime?
Okay. All right. So, Mark, you're up next. Vision for collaboration with the smaller communities.
I think public protection services are critical. Law enforcement, fire departments. A lot of times you see residents on their worst days. And that's something that we don't necessarily do at the commission office every day. I respect each and every one of you and what you do. I have been associated with the sheriff's departments for the last 23 years in Alabama. I know what you deal with on a daily basis. The city of Oxford is in Calhoun County, Alabama. They have an operations center. Their police chief has been very active. They have an area assigned for most of all municipalities and EMA in their one operations center. I know that they share intelligence with the sheriff's department. They have license plate readers that were handy in solving a kidnapping not long ago. They were able to view what car that was by the license plate reader and rescue the female that had been abducted in a house. They found her in a closet because of those license plate readers. The sheriff's department, now the county has enabled them to have county-owned license plate readers. There are multiple cameras throughout several of the municipalities. The law enforcement and the fire department are very, very visible. They're always parked where somebody can see them. They know they're active. They're very involved in the community. So I think there needs to be collaboration and information sharing between each of those departments, and I think that's the best way to deter crime in your community. But you all perform a very special function, and I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Scott, let's go to you.
I feel like I'm largely repeating and saying, a lot of fantastic things have already been said. I would echo that transparency in the budget process, inviting all the stakeholders into the room. So public safety being 60-ish% of the budget here, I would want to make sure everyone is involved in that. So that's step one in the budget side. And then step two, I would leverage technology as much as we can. I heard license plate readers. People have mixed feelings on some of those things, but in your high crime areas, that's how you address it, and you can. Not everyone wants officers, and I've come to realize that. So leveraging technology as much as you can, so there's still a presence of safety, and people want to feel safe without necessarily feeling officers around all the time. So there is a balance to that, and finding that balance within each community is different as well. One thing we've done really well in my current organization in Bakersfield is implementing a violence intervention program, and I've heard someone mention some of that already, and that's exactly with that. You tackle your highest offenders. You'll see that the majority of crime in any organization, any community is typically done by your same 15% of folks. So making sure you can reach them, stretch your dollars, and collaborate with all the other law enforcement officials. Professional development's already been mentioned, but of course IACP, your gold standards for your chiefs. If you can afford it and you have the ability, Quantico at the national level is amazing. So making sure the team has all the tools, we're collaborating, we're leaning on technology, and then reporting out, communicating with one another.
Very good. Thank you for the question, Chief. Appreciate that. We have seen recently at the City of Las Cruces greater coordination and collaboration with our state police, who have come in to help us identify and work on specific operations, for example, with retail theft rings that has been very effective. The community has appreciated that initiative. One of the other areas of feedback we got when we're doing operations with state police is they appreciate the visibility of the different entities coming in to work together and being in the community for specific initiatives. So I think that's one way to leverage your resources is working with the other jurisdictions. I 100% agree with what Stephen said, that crime knows no boundaries. So we definitely need to be partnering so we can have a greater impact on crime prevention. I also agree with the comment about technology and utilizing that. We at the city are implementing a real-time crime center, as Stephen mentioned, and there's every intention that that crime center should be a regional initiative. I know that the county is interested in that as well, and that's something that requires a lot of equipment, training, eventually probably a different facility, someplace that really ensures that it's a regional effort, maybe co-located with the new emergency management building. But that definitely is an opportunity to provide resources on a regional basis for all of our law enforcement. Along those lines, I know we have talked about collaborating in southern New Mexico for regional crime labs, evidence processing. We've gotten equipment grants for that from our federal partners. I know that that can help to speed up some of the delays that we've experienced in getting evidence processed so that, again, we can solve those crimes. So I think to the extent that that's a regional effort, again, that can help all of our law enforcement agencies. And last, I just want to say that one of the areas of crime prevention I think is very important is youth programming and diversion, those kinds of activities that will help our youth have hope and see pathways into maybe a different area that they hadn't thought about, providing mentorship and opportunities, internships for our youth, and just different kinds of activity that helps to engage the youth in order to really address crime before it starts. So thank you very much for the question, Chief. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Let me ask the audience again, are there any? Yes, ma'am, come on forward here.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Bone, and I was wondering, as the county manager, how will you support 4-H and FFA programs in the county?
All right. I'll repeat that question as best I can. Thank you for that. How could the county or the county manager support 4-H or FFA programs? Let me start with you, Mark, on the far left of me.
I can answer that question based on what I've experienced in Calhoun County. Our commissioners were very aware of 4-H and its benefit to the community and to its young people. The county supplied them with equipment. They would help build barns. They would provide mowers for them. And we had a commissioner also to make available an entire facility for hogs and rabbits and chickens and that kind of thing. So, and all the utilities were paid by the county. So they would have chicken shows and rabbit shows and on a regular basis. So 4-H was very important to our commissioners, and I expect that it would be at this level because I think it benefits our young people and teaches them skills as they move forward.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Scott, let's go to you next.
For starters, thank you for speaking. How cool is that, everyone? That's awesome. So I went to and graduated from a technical high school and was involved in several groups like that. So I have personally seen the value. As much as I've traveled later in my life, didn't leave my home state until I won a national championship in my vocational club. So there's tremendous value in this program. Being in several agricultural communities in the past, you're the future. We want to grow and learn from you, and this is an open dialogue. As I even said to you earlier, youth engagement is something I take a lot of pride in. I hope to create a youth commission in here, and I hope to see you sitting up front in that row in the future. But joking aside, we want to engage the community. This is a very young community overall, very family-oriented. So we want to have an open dialogue and make sure we hear from our young residents as well. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. What an exciting opportunity we have to engage with our youth in this way. I echo some of the suggestions earlier regarding the ability of the county to help sponsor specific events and also to give you the platform to teach us, to come and talk to us about the things that you're doing. I think that we can promote volunteers as well for some of the events that you might have, promoting awareness. And then also I am going to encourage you to have all the fundraising chili roasts you can have. I've seen that those are always very popular. And we appreciate you out there being ambassadors for us in FFA and 4-H. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bowen, for your question. For those who don't know, the county is actually kind of the landlord for the organization that does a lot of the coordination, and that's our Cooperative Extension Service. And Commissioner Reynolds has been a huge fan and supporter of 4-H and FFA, and will continue to be, I'm sure, throughout his tenure. And he has already been encouraging us to look at how can we develop better facilities for 4-H and FFA when you have meetings, and not just in Las Cruces, which happens to be a pretty darn urban environment for 4-H and FFA activities, but how can we expand to the northern part of the county and the southern part of the county? And then what else can we do to improve our kind of showcase facility, often used by 4-H and FFA, out at the Doña Ana County Fairgrounds? Some of the buildings that are currently used for the shows are rather old, had not until recently been insulated. The air conditioning is swamp coolers, which during the time of many of the shows is not adequate. And so some good investments to ensure that those continue to be successful, not just for 4-H and FFA, but for all of our other people who go out there and utilize those facilities. And then, yes, as was mentioned, we absolutely need to continue sponsorships. We need to recognize the efforts. Commissioner Reynolds has brought in and done proclamations for some of those groups, and we need to continue to do that, and maybe not just at a county commission meeting during the school year, though I understand some of the students like to get out of school to come in and be recognized, but maybe actually go to some of those meetings and actually let everybody know how much we appreciate you.
All right, thank you, Stephen. All right, let me turn it back over to the audience. Are there any additional questions from those here in the audience? Anybody else? Here we go. Thank you very much.
So I obviously asked one earlier at the other meeting. As a taxpayer here in Doña Ana County, I believe that it's very important. From what I understand, I don't believe it says in your contract how many hours you are required to work. As a taxpayer, I would hope to see you all more than 8 hours a week or a month. I know there are some elected positions that they're required to be there 8 hours a month, which I believe is a waste of taxpayer dollars. I'm hoping that you will be boots on the ground, hand in the dirt, so that everybody that works in that building, as well as us taxpayers, that this is very important. I hope that whoever is selected for this position is going to promise the taxpayers of Doña Ana County and all the residents that you will be there every day and showing the staff in that office that just the way that they have to be there, you're working just as hard, if not harder than them. So I'm hoping that I can actually have you all commit to that you will do this, not be sitting on boards that you're flying all over the United States and not concerned with Doña Ana County, which is your employer.
All right, thank you for that. Just by way of information, generally speaking, all the employment agreements that I've had experience with, and I know many on our candidates here, as well as within the city management, county management profession, do stipulate that those service requirements that are tied to whatever the either the county ordinances are or other policies that require at least the 40-hour work week. And candidly, these positions are considerably more because it's literally a position that's on call 24/7, but I do appreciate those sentiments. All right, let me ask, see if there's another question that might be coming forward. I think there is, one from online.
This question comes in from YouTube. How do you plan to address the challenges the county has experienced recruiting, hiring, and retaining good resources?
Okay, so that, just to repeat it again, how do you address the challenges for recruiting, hiring, and retention, I believe was the other area for addressing in terms of an overall human resources or personnel strategy here. Let me start with Scott with that question, and then I'll, after that, Barbara, you'll be on deck.
It's a great question. Money isn't the root of everything when it comes to jobs. However, we need to make sure we're compensating our team fairly. Doing a third-party salary study every 5 years is considered a best practice in any organization, and I believe that's been done recently here. However, I'd want to make sure that our team is compensated fairly. In my current organization, we have folks varying levels of 16 to upwards of 40%, and that's in dispatch, a very, very tough job as it is. So what we've done is look at the positions that are most out of their peers' category and work backwards from there. So the ones that are 25 to 40%, try to address those folks first. Being a pretty lean organization, it's nice to have things like reserves. I'm not necessarily used to that, but saying that is our greatest resource is our team. We have to take care of the folks that are taking care of the residents. So making a game plan so we can be strategic, accomplish everything in the strategic plan, look at where the team is over, it's a sometimes 5-year period realistically to get the team where they need to be. And by then, sometimes it's cycle up and inflation's caught up again. That's the truth. But culture plays in a large role as well. Money isn't everything. So one thing we do, and this is actually an article ICMA did recently, is looking at those face-to-face meetings with your team leaders and your constituents and making sure that they are they're happy, understand what their goals are. Are they passionate about certain things that they don't get to work on? Is there an ability to cross-train some of these folks and get them exposure in other areas? Oftentimes our people are not utilized to their full capacity, so I think it's really important to get to know them as individuals to make sure they are thriving and in the right roles. So again, I would look at it from a monetary standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, and a professional development standpoint, and I touched on that a lot earlier, so I won't keep going.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much for the question. We were just having a conversation on the way over here about how difficult it's been in recent years to fill positions and the sorts of things we need to look at to do that. And then, of course, to retain talent as well. So I agree that one of the things we need to absolutely understand is what's the market value of the positions that we have at the county. What do class and comp studies show should be the pay bands for the positions, and that way we'll know, are we at market, are we above market, are we below market? And then once we have that information, which we have to periodically study, how could we potentially implement increases or changes? Because it's can be expensive. It can result in salary compression with some positions, so you have to make sure that you are taking into account longevity and other factors, as well as employment contracts with the represented employees as well. So I'm saying it's complex, but it's not impossible. It's just something to be done regularly so that you ensure that you are paying a fair wage for the work that we're asking our employees to do. With respect to hiring, I know that often at the city there's frustration. People are feeling like it's taken a while to hire people. I know that's always the case. You have a vacancy, you have an urgent need, you want to be able to fill that position as quickly as possible. On the other hand, we are a public entity. We have to be transparent. We need to make sure that positions are posted, that there's a robust process for vetting candidates, the appropriate oversight from human resources, et cetera. So we have an obligation to ensure that we're hiring in the best way possible. So that can lead to a tension between the urgent need to fill positions and the need to follow process protocols, laws, et cetera. But that's always something that we can look at to understand how we can do it better through training or technology, et cetera. And finally, with respect to retaining employees, absolutely agree that we need to invest in those who are at the county, working very hard for the county. We need to understand what their career aspirations are and to help provide development plans and opportunities for them, whether it's training or interim assignments or lateral moves or whatnot, in order to fulfill the desires that they have about the work that they want to be doing. I also want to say that one of the things we recently implemented at the city is both remote work and alternate work schedules. Not every position is available to have that kind of a work schedule, but where it does make sense, we have been open to that, because we have wanted to be as flexible as we can, and I know that our employees have really appreciated that. We first did a pilot project with remote work to see how that would work. We evaluated it. Did we want to implement it citywide where it would work? Yes, let's do it. But again, I mentioned that there are a lot of other positions that they're front line. It's not like they can do the work from home. So what could we do for those folks? That's why we implemented alternate work schedules. People could choose the days and the times that they wanted to work, as long as we at least had the regular coverage for our community, so that we didn't have a lowered level of service. But something I know that our staff has really appreciated having. And the last thing I'll say is, I mentioned earlier, or in another session, that I've helped to implement leadership training for those who are supervisors or who would like to be supervisors, and it helps with a lot of the knowledge about what it takes, the kind of skills that are necessary, whether it's soft skills like communication, or whether it's knowledge of how to put a budget together, that sort of thing. That's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, as I said, to smooth the transition for those who want to move into those roles, but also to make sure that people who are in those roles are doing them really well, because I'm sure you've heard it said that people won't leave organizations, they'll leave supervisors. So we really want to make sure that our supervisors have the right training in order to do a great job managing their teams, and we want to help them to gain that expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Stephen?
Well said from the first two co-panelists up here, co-applicants. Absolutely, we need to have good compensation available to our employees. The last comprehensive county government-wide compensation study developing those pay bands is now over a decade. HR does have plans to get that revisited in the very near future, and we'll be approaching the BOCC for funding to do that, because as was noted, it is not cheap, but it's absolutely necessary. Now, that doesn't mean that it's been completely ignored. There have been a lot of individual departments that have been reviewed for classification and compensation reviews. And as that has happened, we've also found some other challenges that as a county we cannot allow to continue, where an employee has worked for us for 20 years, but they came in with 0 years experience and they were on the bottom of the pay band. 20 years later, they have 20 years of experience, but somebody else now just comes in with 15 years of experience and is making more. We've got to regularly revisit our current employees and make sure we are giving them credit for the years they have spent with us getting experience with us. It's only fair. And we can't say that it wasn't good experience because we know the experience they got. And we can't say it wasn't relevant experience because it was doing their very job. Similarly, we need to make sure our employees are valued and they know they are valued. And that is more than just compensation, as was pointed out. We've done some asking over the last couple of months, including with our Employee Advisory Council. If we create an employee recognition program, what would employees find as good recognition of their effort? Sometimes it's just a thank you. They would just like to hear thank you, you're doing a good job. That is something we need to really encourage our supervisors to do. And I know there have been supervisors out there in the past that have thought, well, they're just doing their job. We shouldn't be thanking them for doing their job. If they're doing their job well, we absolutely should be thanking them for doing a good job. And we should be thanking coworkers. Hey, thank you for taking some time to help me out with this or with that. And we need to encourage that type of thanks across the organization. Because often all we hear are complaints because somebody didn't do anything, but we don't give them the opportunity to say thank you for those people that are supporting them, and then recognizing those individuals. And when it comes to recognition, as was pointed out, it's not always about money. I was pleasantly surprised when I asked, what would be a monetary amount that people would say, yeah, I feel like that $500 for Employee of the Quarter, that really is a good thank you. I was surprised that people said, I think I'd rather have a couple days off. And so it doesn't necessarily have to come at a fiscal cost to the county. But the answers to those are really, we have to ask our employees, what makes you feel valued? What makes it worth coming into work? And giving our supervisors permission to make those changes, as Barbara mentioned, for alternate work schedules. We now have 2 departments that have really leaned into alternate work schedules and have a number of employees who are working 7:30 to 4:30, and just as many now that are working 8:30 to 5:30. And that not only benefits our employees, but allows the offices to stay open longer, which is benefiting our customers. And again, at no additional cost to the county. Some supervisors are now asking, can I look at a 410 schedule? Absolutely. Put together a plan of how we're going to meet the needs of the county, bring it forward, and let's talk about it. And does a 3-day weekend every week appeal to employees? Oh, yes, it does. As having been at an agency where we implemented said schedule, there's only one thing that appeals to them more than a 410 work schedule, and that's a 312 work schedule, or 313 is what it comes out to, because then they have a 4-day weekend every week. Now, we're probably not going to be able to do that everywhere, but for many of our departments, that actually might be very viable for us. And it's been mentioned, do we have opportunities to take advantage of remote work? If we are going to attract high-quality candidates, that is absolutely something that we need to be looking at. And so there are 2 departments who are actively right now going through that process of identifying which positions can be allowed to work remotely. Not 100% remotely, but say 40% remotely. Obviously, if we have positions that are mission critical and they have to be able to respond within a certain time period to issues, they're going to be tied a little bit more. But it gives us an opportunity to start exploring and testing programs out, and they are going to be very different from department to department as to what may or may not work. But giving those department heads that flexibility to start looking within their organization and working with their teammates, I think, really does start to make a difference. And then I'm just going to kind of real quickly on the recruiting side, nothing says we want you to come here than the testimony of our employees. And we don't take advantage of that. If you look at our jobs page, you get text. We've got these postings. Here are the qualifications. Here's how you apply. Click this button. A video, a 20-second, 30-second video from an employee who's already in that department may make a big difference to somebody who's looking through a variety of websites and comes across something that has a personal touch to it. And that's something I think we haven't done and really need to start taking advantage of. Thank you.
I think it's very important to ensure your pay scale is adequate and up to date. I think that can affect recruiting. That can also affect retention as well. As far as nuts and bolts recruiting, I think you need to reach out and ensure that your job is posted everywhere that it's possible. Online, bulletin boards, reach out to high schools, job fairs. I know that has been one thing that we have done recently, is branched out and made sure that we were trying to get the word out. The website, Facebook page, everywhere that we could possibly place that position. And it had been successful. We started realizing that we were receiving more applications. As far as hiring, I think it is important to ensure you are hiring the right people. If you hire the wrong person or someone that does not exemplify the character of your organization, it's going to hurt you a lot more than it will help you. I think background checks, and we had implemented that where I have been. They did not have that in place before, but it has saved the county from hiring highway department workers that were going to be driving dump trucks that had DUI convictions. That's something that you look at protecting your residents. That's very important. There's not a worse look than a county employee doing something that hurts a citizen or a resident, and you should have known about that before they were hired. So that's something else that's very important. I think as far as retention, generally speaking, I think all employees want to know that what they do is important and that they're appreciated. I don't think there's anything in the county, any service that the county provides, that is not important, because they're all required to make the organization move forward. So employees are very important through the entire process. If you don't have employees, you don't have a county. You have a county government on a name somewhere, on a document, but you don't have a county. And if you don't have a county, if you don't have employees, you're not providing your residents with services. And to do that effectively, efficiently, I think it's important for your employees to know that you're there if they need help. If they need something to complete their job satisfactorily or adequately and they don't have that, I want them to be able to come to me and tell me that, because there's nothing I want to do more than to make every employee successful, regardless of what that is. If they want to move up, if they want to stay where they are. People are different. And as far as recognition, some people would like to be recognized. Some don't want you mentioning their public. So I think it's something where we need to know what the individual employees would like. You certainly don't want to do something that's going to make them uncomfortable. But I believe you have a very professional HR staff here, and I would look to them for their guidance as well and their input. But if you don't have employees, you don't have a county. So I think they are the utmost importance.
All right, thank you. Yes. Do we have another question from the audience? Yes, Commissioner.
And if I may, so the county has an extraterritorial zone that may not be in compliance with other parts of the county. So the question is, as a county manager, what would be your plan for Doña Ana County to enforce stricter development codes in preparation for growth? Because there's some areas that in the past have been given permits that are not specifically up to code, And what method would you utilize to bring them into compliance? Is that correct?
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. So extraterritorial jurisdictions or zones and compliance and bringing those particular properties and other uses into compliance and the strategy to do so. Mark, let's start with you with this question, and then Stephen, you'll be on deck.
There is no zoning in the county in Alabama. We didn't have zoning. We didn't have building codes. Not that's not needed. I think it protects the residents if you do have a standard to build to. I think it's very important to make sure that everything is being satisfied before that permit is issued. I think that's where you do a lot of the work and you ensure that things are being followed prior to that permit being issued, because it's harder to get back. And another thing the county needs to do is make sure it's not violating its own policies. So to me, I think during the application process, that is the time that concerns would need to be addressed prior to that permit being issued.
As was noted, the county has to adhere to its own standards. If it is covered in the Uniform Development Code, the only way that it should be getting changed or waived is through the process identified in the UDC, which is usually going to be then taking it to Planning and Zoning on an appeal and or further appeal to the Board of County Commissioners. There may be reasons why a variance might be issued in any given case, but in general, the standard should be we don't just give a variance unless there is a good reason that generally benefits not the landowner who's asking for the variance, but the larger area, especially when it comes to planned developments. A development should not hurt the people that are around it. With that being said, our UDC is still in version 1. It is time that we actually go back and look at the Uniform Development Code and apply the lessons that we have learned since its adoption and get us to that next iteration. And part of that should be that we also have design guidelines that are attached to that. So when you want to know, what do I need for flood control, you can go to that design manual and it'll actually explain why things are necessary. When you need to know what's a proper park, the design manual gives you the requirements for the county to have on a park. And some of those holes currently exist in our Uniform Development Code, and that's also caused concerns for inconsistency among people who are applying for permits. That, well, so-and-so got this, why am I having to do something different? So it should be standardized, it should be a transparent process, and we should be minimizing the number of variance requests because it should be very easy to find the information as to what is and is not allowable in an area. I have seen the board evaluate some of those issues where somebody says, you know what, I want this to be zoned as X because I've been, even though it's never been approved for 20 years. They've just been doing it and hadn't been caught yet. And catching people on doing those kinds of things relies on a couple of different areas. One of those is on a codes compliance. One of them is actually a project that our assessor has been trying to work on, which is people have been building buildings and making additions to their homes and never filing for a permit. And the only way we can find those is through a consistent reappraisal process or reassessment process. And that helps us as we find those inconsistencies, we find those issues where people have not been in compliance and start bringing them back in. And there are fines and penalties that can be utilized in those cases, as well as when something is reassessed, the ability to charge the appropriate amount to those property owners to therefore then support the broader community. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So For me, the three key elements whenever we're trying to comply with a law or regulation or a rule is first being able to understand what are the restrictions, what are the guidelines, just being very clear on what you can and cannot do. And then we need to have training for all staff who are involved in that role, whether it's issuing permits, whether it's inspections, that they also understand the rules and the laws so that they can help to enforce them. And then the third element is the review or the tracking, and I'm glad that Stephen brought up the assessment process, because he's absolutely right. That is the mechanism in some cases for coming back to find some of these things that are actually not even permitted. Update of the code was mentioned as well. I think it's a good opportunity when codes are updated, not only to address gaps that we have in the code, but potentially rewriting them so they are easy to understand, so that we help the community be able to comply. Sometimes non-compliance is because the code is so complex and there's information about part of the requirements in one part of the code and slightly different information in a different part of the code, and it's just very difficult to navigate it. So you have the opportunity every time you do an update to address that kind of reorganization of the code as well. When you do that, of course, it's also very important to get input from the community, from developers, from the folks who are working on the front lines to issue permits, et cetera, to understand what are the issues that need to be addressed in a code rewrite. I think that there's nothing that can cause greater strife than when someone comes forward for a waiver, for example, to planning and zoning, and then ultimately to the elected body to say, I need this variance because my neighbor already has it and they haven't applied for anything. And so then you set communities against each other when there hasn't been a standard that we've been held to. And so, we don't want to see those kinds of conflicts in the community. And so it's really in our best interest to have a very clear, enforceable, standardized process through a very clear code. Thank you.
A lot of fantastic things have already been said there, so I'll echo some of that and build on it as well. We can't say economic development is one of our biggest priorities and say, no, we're not going to hold these folks to our standard. So, and not everyone will want that, as was duly noted by several people here. In my current community, we have a similar situation, and what we've done is, it's a very small team, but a handful of people have focused solely on getting those areas that are a little under par up to speed and equivalent with what our standard is. We call it our concierge, our white glove team, realizing on the assessor side that not everyone wants to have that evaluation done, and your property values go up, of course. There's fantastic homes I've been looking at recently. They have beautiful casitas behind them, but at our level, we have to look at the impact of all those accessory dwelling units. That puts a strain on our already strained infrastructure that's vast, and it is an overall need. So again, looking at things, stricter development codes across adhering to our strategic planning process, having a team devoted, even if it's a small team, to getting those areas up to speed, and just adhering to best practices is going to help us grow across the entire county, not just in certain areas.
All right, thank you very much. We have about 10 minutes remaining, so we probably have time for maybe another question or two. Are there any additional questions from the audience? Anything online? Yes, ma'am. Come on forward there, Anita.
How do you feel about bringing in a third party to review and update county policies and procedures to ensure we are following best practices?
Okay. An opinion on bringing in a third party, a consultant perhaps, to help with best practices review and evaluating some existing county services. Barbara, let's start with you.
All right. Thank you for the question. Yes. As a local government entity, we run on policies, of course, also on ordinances, on different requirements that we have. Policies are really at the heart of what we're implementing as an organization, whether it's a policy from the elected board or a policy from management. I'm actually the chair of the City Manager Policy Committee, and I have the responsibility, along with legal and HR and one of our assistant city managers, annually to review our policies to make sure that they are up to date, relevant, that they don't have any gaps or they're not conflicting with each other or any other ordinance that we have. So I think that policies are incredibly important. I know that they're complex and they can actually be a huge endeavor to really review all policies. So I certainly would not be opposed to having a third party come in and take a look at everything, whether it's personnel policies, whether it's procurement policies, whether, again, they're policies that are administrative or they're policies that have been adopted by our elected body. It's a vast array and it can be very complex. So if you don't have the resources to allocate that as a project, then I think it makes absolute sense then to consider someone coming in externally. Externally, you'll always have to be sure that you're setting the scope appropriately, the expectations as far as the time frame that you want to have the work done in. And then, of course, because you're paying for folks to come in and do this work, then you really need to commit to the organization that you're going to do something with it when they come back with findings. Otherwise, those are not funds well spent. So while I was a consultant previously, I do have a focus on making sure that when we do have consultants coming into the organization, that we've still very carefully managed the scope of their work, and then we do very deliberately utilize that work for the good of the community and the organization. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Stephen, let's go to you.
I'm going to give you a quick answer and then a little more detail. Quick answer is certainly we should evaluate whether or not we need to bring somebody in from the outside and take advantage of it when we need to. But we do need to make sure we know which policies we're talking about, and we need to understand that it is not going to reduce the burden on the county team. I have seen this with law enforcement accreditation, for example. That is very much focused on industry standards, industry policies and procedures for law enforcement. We have the same thing for detention centers. And those teams are responsible for making sure that the policy fits the organization. And then the accrediting body makes sure that they are meeting the standards, the industry standards. So it is very useful if you don't have the local capacity, and if we have policies and procedures that have never gone through that type of a review, it is a great starting point to use an external consultant or expert in an area to come in and assist in that policy and procedure review. Again, you're going to find people that have different skill sets, contractors with different skill sets. So if we're going to be reviewing, for example, HR policies, we probably want to be focusing on somebody that has expertise in that area. If we're going to be looking at finance policies, that's a totally different skill set, probably a different contractor. There are firms out there that offer broad services, but then they'll usually have different project leads within those areas. And there are standards out there in many of these areas for us to meet. You've heard the other panelists over yesterday and today talk about ICMA, the International City and County Management Association. They have some really good policies out there that are already available, best practices guides that can easily be turned to. But again, coming back to that short answer, yes, there is value in bringing in somebody from the outside, if for nothing else, to get the project moving and keep the project on track and give tips and guidance to the team as they are reviewing what is going to fit for our area. Thank you.
I would not necessarily be opposed to including a third party to review policies if I felt like that would be a benefit to the organization. Again, I think you have very professional employees in this county, and no one knows your policies like your employees. So I think it's important you do as much as you can internally. If there's still additional help that's needed, then you look to the third party to actually come in and help. But that scope needs to be very definite. It needs to be marked. They need to understand exactly what they're looking for. But again, our employees will know more about this county than any consultant, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be a benefit.
A resounding yes is the answer for me. I was kind of reflecting a little bit just in the last 5 years on different studies I've had in organizations, and it's never in an effort to fact check your team. It's there to complement the team and get outside perspective. So just in the last few years, I was looking here, traffic calming studies, that helps your law enforcement folks and your engineers to make sure your traffic patterns are there for the growth. Not too big of an issue, but definitely something you want to look at, particularly as we're expecting roughly 300,000 people in the next 15 years. So we need to be looking at everything in 15, 20-year increments to prepare today. Public safety does a real good job on benchmarking and best practices, so that's not one I would typically lean into. One I'm experiencing in my current community right now that we don't often think about is technology and how we're leveraging that or not doing so to reach the vast parts of the community. We've talked a lot about broadband, but even from just simply an organizational standpoint, making sure our teams have all those tools. Looking at facilities, I know it was said already, but I've leaned on third-party companies to come in and they look at everything from your LED lights to how much air conditioning is escaping, and that means dollars and cents that matter to our taxpayers. Paying personnel was discussed earlier. Parks per square mile, there's an expert for everything, and someone that's got a specialization in darn near everything. I would totally be open to it, and not just open to it, I am counting on it as hopefully someone that's coming from the outside to move my family here. So transparency is everything, and really this comes down to being transparent with the community, which pays for everything we do, and in building trust in the community. You guys have turned on the news. Trust in government's probably the all-time low. So I think anything we can do to check what we're doing, validate it, and learn from it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Did we have something that was, did I ask one more question, I believe? One more? Okay. So our last question of the afternoon, and then we will end the question and answer and then move into the meet and greet for the remaining time. So, yes, ma'am.
Hola, buenas tardes. Dispensen ahorita que me paré aquí, no sabía que todavía no habían terminado.
Good afternoon. Excuse me for standing here. I didn't realize you hadn't completed your answers.
Pero una de mis preguntas es, aquí en Doña Ana hay colonias. Okay.
My question is, here in Doña Ana, we have the colonias.
Y de muchas de esas colonias no tienen las necesidades que el pueblo necesita.
And a lot of those colonias don't have the necessities that the community needs.
Entonces mi pregunta es, ¿ustedes qué van a hacer sobre esas necesidades que esas personas necesitan?
My question is, what are you going to do for those necessities that those people are lacking?
All right. Thank you very much for the question as it relates to the colonias, the infrastructure and other services needed for those important areas within the county. Let me start with you, Stephen, and then we'll rotate to Mark, and then Scott, and then Barbara will make it clean us up.
Buenas tardes y gracias. The colonias are absolutely a challenge for us, and I am happy to say one of the first things I heard from staff in the county when I came on board in the interim role is they wanted to get out and do something that was done over 7 years ago. And the contract has actually already been signed for partnership with New Mexico State University and our Health and Human Services Department to go out and review the current status of each and every one of our colonias to find out what are the needs in each colonia so we can start prioritizing them and bringing those to the board for action. There are already funds available to address some of these challenges. We just need to know where the needs are, what the needs are, and start prioritizing those. I think there would be nothing greater for the county to achieve in the next 10 years than to have all of those 38 colonias be able to be removed from colonia status because we've met all of the infrastructure needs. Now that's probably not completely realistic since they've been decades and decades in the making, but it is absolutely something we should be striving for. Finding out what the needs are, and that includes communicating with the people who live in the colonias, and then making sure that we are making investments in there and leveraging our county funds with the available state and federal funds to carry out the projects to make those improvements. So, gracias.
I think it would be important for me, coming from the outside, to become familiar with each one of the colonias and what their specific needs are. Opening and establishing a line of communication with each community and learning as much as I could, and hopefully be able to think out of the box, because this seems like it's been an ongoing issue in the past, and it won't be solved overnight. But I would like to bring some out-of-the-box thinking, some other possible options or strategies that may not have been thought of in the past, just to try to assist those people with basic needs. And I think an area is well deserving of basic needs as much as the county can afford to provide those. Again, they're county residents, regardless of where you live, and I think the county needs to, and I think they want to, provide as many services as they can. You have a very professional governing body here. There are a lot of communities that can't say that. I think this governing body cares for each of their residents and wants to do the best for them. So, to me, coming in, looking for alternative options, and becoming familiar with each of these communities is what I would do. Thank you.
It's a twofold approach for me, using tools to evaluate what is, which colonias of the 38 are in the worst condition. So whether that's through New Mexico State University and some of the partnerships mentioned, or earlier we mentioned transparency and bringing in third parties to evaluate. That starts with a conversation. In the meetings yesterday, I discussed a pretty comprehensive citizen engagement and coming to people where they are, having district town hall meetings, but personally, I would want to come out and see for myself and say we hear of the 38, here's the 10 that are in most need. We have to prioritize there. It goes worst to first, whether you're talking street roads, facilities, or areas people live in. So those in most need are the ones that need the most attention. We have to prioritize from there. Being here today.
Thank you. Señora, gracias por su pregunta. Discúlpeme, voy a responder en inglés. I'm so happy to hear what Stephen mentioned, that there's a study underway in MSU and Health and Human Services to assess the conditions of the colonias. Because before we can take any action, we really need to understand what the needs are, what the situation is. I'm familiar with master planning kinds of activities where you're looking at an area and you're laying out a plan to address all the needs of an area, primarily through infrastructure. And I think that the colonias would be great candidates for those kinds of master plans that would allow us to prioritize. I also agree that there are probably funds available, as Stephen mentioned, at the county, but there are also lots of grant opportunities as well, whether through the state or the federal government. I know that the county does a fantastic job at bringing in grant funds, and so it would just be a focused effort. Once you have a master plan that really helps to bolster the grant application as well for the funds. So I'm optimistic, even though it's probably as Stephen said, it's decades in the making. It's a large investment, but we need to start doing it, and I think that there are funds available for us to tap into. I'm familiar in the city. We've had some initiatives where some of our community members have felt like we are spending more of our attention and funds on some parts of the city and leaving them behind. And we have to be very careful whether we have initiatives for expanded development or economic development in particular areas, that we're not forgetting parts of our community. So I'm very familiar with that concern in the community. And I think we've tried to do different things in the city, for example, to incentivize infill development so that we encourage people to go back and redevelop properties that are in parts of the city that have been neglected before from attention. We know that there are people in neighborhoods there who would like to have access to better shopping and safe routes to school. And we want to make sure that that everybody has the opportunity to have those types of amenities. We've had a program called Lift Up Las Cruces, where we've gone into certain areas of the community in need and looked at not only infrastructure, things like street improvements, things like lighting for safety, but also programmatic. What's available for the people in those communities in terms of their quality of life? What kinds of youth programming are there? Are there enough parks in the area? Do we have programming in the parks? So it's not just the infrastructure. It's really a complete look at the lives of the folks who live in those areas and what do they need and what are the things that we can provide. Of course, we have partnered with other nonprofits and other community agencies to provide some of those services, to do some of the assessments, to help us with outreach to the community. But I think it's an incredibly important endeavor, and as folks have said here before, I don't think that there's anything more important than making sure that those who are in our community who don't have the basic infrastructure they need, that we help them to attain that. Thank you so much for your question. Muchísimas gracias, señora.
Well, I want to take this time to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules for being part of this important process and assisting the Board of County Commissioners with the selection process for the next county manager. We have some time yet that we'll move into the meet and greet, where if you have additional questions for individual candidates, we'd like to be able to offer that at this particular point in time. Thank you for being here in person and those participating online and providing your questions. It's most appreciated, and thank you very much again for taking the time today.